Well, I'm going to introduce, at the time, we had a board member who was terrific, who's been a great mentor to me over the course of my career. And I said, well, I'm going to introduce you to this guy who's on the board, and then we'll introduce you to the CEO. And I think the board member is going to tell the CEO that he needs to hire you. And he's like, this guy looks at me, he's like, you're out of your mind. Like, what do you think the chances of this are? I'm like, I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1, but who cares? Like, we got to try. Sure enough, like, plan went off without a hitch, apparently, because I introduced him to the board member, who introduced him to the CEO, and next thing you know, probably 2 months later, he's showing up as my boss. I immediately, as soon as the day he walked in, I was his one direct report, and then I became his tour guide around the company for about a month and a half, while he basically did an assessment of the company. All of the senior operations team got really nervous and bent out of shape,
Welcome to Winning Strategies Playbook, the podcast where we welcome business leaders, CEOs, and industry experts to discuss the rise to the top, building wealth, and real estate insights. Here's your host, Jeremy Spann.
So listeners, welcome to Winning Strategies Playbook. For information on our guests and downloading this episode, go to myexperiencedrealtor.com. Click on podcasts, and you can find out information on the great Jamie Peace. Welcome, Jamie.
I'm glad to be here, Jeremy.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Yeah. 245.
Yeah. We look pretty good. Well, I mean, this week, I already know I'm setting myself up for something right here, right?
It's a loose royal.
So, fellow Marine, here to share some wisdom with the rest of the podcast world.
We use that term loosely as well, in terms of wisdom.
So you've been listening to some of these, so you know I have to start every one of these with a joke.
I brought a joke for you too.
Oh, so, you did? Yeah. You're the first person to bring one.
Yeah, well, I mean, come on.
Well, you go first.
No. This is your stage.
Okay. All right. So this one I found to be fitting since it's in the energy sector related. What is a wind turbine's favorite color?
I don't even have a remote guess here.
Blue. Get it, blue? Wind, blue.
No.
That one tanked hard. I mean, that one literally just went over like a fart in church, right?
I'm still thinking about it. I'm not really sure. Did you tell it to anybody else before you told it on the show? Okay.
No,
maybe you should do a dry run.
My last two have bombed. This one bombed, and my poor MBA one bombed. So I think I'm gonna have to run these by someone before I do these, because I really thought I didn't. No, clearly I didn't think this one. I didn't.
Well, you want to hear mine?
Yeah, let's hear it.
What did the fish say when he swam into a wall?
What did the fish say when he swam into a wall? I don't know.
Damn.
We're just going to make this next hour and a half like cheesy dad jokes. Clearly you win.
I can't remember any jokes. That's probably the only joke I've been able to remember for the past 30 years of my life.
Oh, the audience has no idea just how funny it is that you're here. Mainly because I typically say when Jamie starts talking to me, if he's here, no one's running hell. Because he's always mean to me. He's always saying that I look overweight and I look gray, any number of things. So I don't expect that to be any different on this. So if anything that the audience gets out of this will at least be a good laugh.
Hopefully everybody will be a little bit entertained.
Yeah. So
actually, I brought you a gift.
You brought me a gift?
Brought you a hat.
You brought me a hat. Look at this. TSS. Total Sand Solution. That's actually a good looking hat.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you. See, I am very suspect. When you come bearing gifts, I'm like, all right, there's nothing's for free in this world. I
just figured, you were nice enough to ask me to come join you on your podcast. I should, bring you our latest and greatest piece of swag from the company. And
I'm a whore for free swag, too.
I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. I'm a whore for anything free. Right? But before we go into talking about what's going on in the energy space, let's let the audience know who Jamie Peace is. As we often joke, you could be friends with a cactus and a rock, and I know how much you love talking about yourself. That was my facetious tone. By the way, I had to look up what that word meant.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Maryland.
Grew up in Maryland. Grew up on a farm on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. Both my parents, they were self-employed. They ran a wholesale tree and shrub nursery. My brother, it was myself and my younger brother, and he has since gone on to take over the family business. He's running the nursery and growing it quite successfully, and really enjoying that. He started doing that. I mean, he got into the nursery business right after he got out of college, and then ended up at taking over the family business a couple of years later, probably 3-4 years later, while I was still gallivanting around the world. But yeah, so I grew up in Maryland, ended up going to college at the Naval Academy. I think when people are always, when they hear that, they're like, oh, well, do you always want to be in the military? And that is not the case. I'm not even sure if I really truly grasped that I was going to be in the military until after I got to the Naval Academy. It might have been 2 years into the Naval Academy. Actually became a reality.
What, I took a wrong turn?
Yeah.
Like, how the hell I get here?
And the long and short of it is I went to the Naval Academy because when I went and looked at other colleges, nothing kind of jumped off the map at me. And the Naval Academy at the time, when I was a senior in high school, was recruiting me to play 2 sports. And I ended up only playing 1 sport while I was there, but that was attractive to me. And the Naval Academy felt like, if you get into the Naval Academy, you don't turn down that opportunity. So off I went. And it's quite a interesting experience going to school there. I've got a lot. I mean, obviously a lot of friends that went there. There's a varying degree of sort of fondness, or how, like, there's people that are fond of the place, and there's people that still feel like they bear the scars and have significant disdain. And I still fall into the latter. There's a bridge when you go going back into Annapolis from east to west, and you drive over this bridge, and if you look over to the east, or over the left hand side, you see the Naval Academy, and they call it "Oh shit bridge," because as you're going over, you look over and you see that this place, and your stomach sinks, and you're like, I'm heading back. It's like this overwhelming feeling of, oh shit, I'm heading back. I still get that feeling when I drive over that bridge today. And so I had no regrets going there in terms of where it's ended up taking me and everything that went with that. But I don't look back at those 4 years with like a reverence or extreme fondness that I think a lot of people think about when they think about their college experience, or even a lot of folks that went to the Naval Academy. I mean, there's a lot of rules there. And I think that probably the thing that I got best at was figuring out how to break all of the rules there and not get caught. And never stood a day restriction and broke every rule that I could find. So
you're what we call crafty.
Yeah. There it was. You were stealth if you were getting away with stuff. So look, had a great. Ended up, I guess, having some great experiences and some painful experiences while I was there. And even while I was there, I had no idea of really what I wanted to do. My party line was, I'm going to do 5 years and get out. They used to call it 5 and dive. I was going to do the easiest path that I could find in terms of, I was like, oh, I'll just go drive ships for a living. That sounds easy. I'll go be a Navy surface warfare officer. And it kind of got to the end, coming into the end of my junior year. And all I knew was I didn't want to sign up for more than 5 years out of graduating, which meant that I was like, no flying, because flying meant you had to do basically 9 years. I had the eyesight and everything, and people couldn't believe that I didn't want to go fly. And the time commitment was long-term time commitment of going to flight school and afterwards, terrified me of making that type of commitment. It was 5 years and get out, 5 years and get out. But I also didn't know that like this whole driving ships thing was really like that great of an idea. So I left the door open to go do Marine Corps things. So I went and spent, I can't remember, it was 4 weeks or 6 weeks at Quantico and doing a program they called Leatherneck, which is basically like you go suffer through this and you're allowed to select Marines on the back end if you so choose. And that actually was, well, they had more rules, and some of the rules I felt were even dumber than the rules I had at the Naval Academy. But I had the opportunity to do like fun, physical, hard things and kind of push myself. And when I got back and the next, going into the end of your first semester of your last year, or I guess going into like probably November, December, you put your selections in, and I put my selection in. I want to go Marines, and my friends were like, literally, like, you've lost your mind. Like, you can't, like, we can't even get a Navy regulation haircut. And you like now you want to join the Marine Corps. Like, you have completely lost your mind. And that's probably, quite factual. But I ended up getting selected for Marines and went on to, got my head shaved the next day. And after I got whenever that was, sometime in the spring, early spring, and off I went to Quantico for the basic school, and ultimately went the infantry route. And then, for no other reason than I figured if you're going to be a Marine, you might as well be a grunt. I told that to my staff platoon commander, who was like the guy in charge of training us or developing us. And he just started laughing. He was an engineer. He's like, that's the most honest answer anybody's ever given me. And I was just too stupid to come up with a better answer, I think, or not thinking it through well enough that I might actually offend him, that I didn't want to do his job. So anyway, ended up going to the grunts, and that was terrific. It was awesome. You got your own platoon of guys and getting to push yourself, and, got to do 2 deployments, generally to the Middle East, but I did mine on Muse. So I got to go to Iraq, but I also got to go to the Horn of Africa. I got to go to Sri Lanka for the tsunami that hit, I guess that was 2005. Got to stop in Australia on the way home both times, which nobody's bummed out about. So got to do a lot of the things that people want to do when they sign up for the Marine Corps. Got to spend a lot more time on Navy ships than any poor Marine ever should. And then as I started I was coming into like my 4-year mark, and had the opportunity to basically throw my hat in the ring to go to recon. And instead of getting out, decided I was going to go to recon, and of all places, I was going to go to 3rd Recon, which is over in Okinawa, which you know well. And which is, as far as I'm concerned, that's the best place to be a recon Marine. You have
nobody's there to monitor you.
There's significantly fewer rules. You have nothing to do other than.
And who the hell wants to go to Camp Schwab?
Yeah, you just trained, you worked out, and you drank beer. That was about most of what we did there. And then you're on a tropical island, and then. So I had the opportunity to lead 2 different recon platoons on 2 different 31st Muse, which, while the war is going on, isn't the most glamorous thing, but got to do some really interesting stuff in Korea and the Philippines, and, got to work with the U.S. Secret Service when George Bush visited Jakarta in Indonesia in 2006, as a quick reaction force for him. Got to do a lot of fun stuff. Got to spend a bunch of time in Korea. It was awesome. Those people were great. The Filipinos were outstanding. Got to spend a month and a half in Australia training with the Aussies. It was a pretty good deal. And then I started coming up on like kind of the second, I guess my intent was, I guess I had told my mom back in like 2004 that I was like, I'm going to get out after doing my 5 years. And then I threw my hat in the ring for recon, and I got selected, and I was like, well, I got to do this. Like, this is cool. Like, I'm going to go to dive school and jump school and CQB and all this other stuff. And then while I was at 3rd Recon, I did those 2 deployments, and I, told my mom again, hey, I'm going to get out after this. But at the same time, they stood up the new Marine Special Operations Units, now known as the Raider Battalions. And they needed guys like me to go do even more fun things with fewer rules and better toys and a lot more funding. So I threw my hat in the ring for that and got selected and got to do more fun things with even more talented Marines and better toys and more money and fewer rules. I got to go to Afghanistan with them. Ended up doing a really long deployment, about 9 months in Afghanistan in 2008, 2009. And then at that point, I finally told my mom, like, I'm getting out. And she stopped believing me. And a year later, I got out. So I got out about a year after I got back from Afghanistan. And I got out in 2010. I got back from Afghanistan in September of 2009. So
how many total deployments did you have?
5.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was in a period of
2001 to 2000 or 2001 to 2010. So I did just over 9 years in the Marine Corps.
And 5 deployments.
Yeah.
That's a tempo right there.
It didn't leave a lot of room for anything else. And honestly, if you ask me why I decided to get out, it's because it didn't. I mean, I didn't have any hobbies. I didn't have any.
I always say you don't have any friends, but you still don't have any friends.
Yeah.
But I like to try to call myself a friend, and then you treat me like a friend, and I'm like, I don't even know why I answer the call whenever I see your number popping up on my cell phone.
Yeah, look, everything suffers. Especially in the special operations community, there is very little room for anything other than training and deploying and training and deploying. Even when you get back from deployment, it's the next workup just starts up and off you go, and you're never home. I didn't have time. All the hobbies that I had growing up, I didn't have any hobbies by the time I got out of the Marine Corps that I was still actively doing. It turns into kind of a very, like, I don't know, warrior monk lifestyle. I mean, I did the same thing. I worked out a lot. And then I would go train, and I'd plan the next training mission and all those things. And that was all. I mean, that was all I did. And then, in my free time, I would go hang out with the guys, and all of us in the team would go get together and, probably drink too much beer. And so I don't know, it wasn't the healthiest, it wasn't the most unhealthy lifestyle, but it certainly wasn't the healthiest lifestyle in terms of like personal relationships. I didn't do anything with anybody outside of my team or outside of the company. That's who I hung out with. I didn't have any civilian friends in California. And I, basically picked my head up and said, there's got to be more to life than training, deploying, and training, deploying. And my last deployment, it was terrific. I had a great go of things. I was, got to bring everybody home in spite of our best efforts to
throwing yourself in harm's way.
Everybody came home in one piece, and I felt like I'd had enough. They wanted me to go back again, basically turn around and probably do a 9-month workup and go back over for probably 6-7 months. And I couldn't commit to that. And, I just think at that point I was like, you've gotten everything out of me you're going to get. So, and the prospect of getting promoted to a rank that wouldn't allow me to do any of the things that would ever.
Yeah. Cause at major, you pretty much are just
Yeah. My last team, I mean, they literally called me Peter Pan. They're like, you've never had to grow up. Nobody gets to have. I mean, I'd done nothing but deploy my entire career. I'd had 2 recon platoons, a MARSOC team. That MARSOC team, we were together for 2.5 years. By the time we gotten back from that deployment, and I had a rifle platoon, and I was a rifle company XO. Like, I'd never had to leave leading Marines. I'd never had to lead another officer. Basically, a little bit as a company XO, but that's where the fun stops, basically.
Yeah. Because now you got to be responsible, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the guys in the team called me Peter Pan, and that I just had never had to grow up. I'd never had to do anything other than what everybody wants to do. And being a recon platoon commander, a rifle platoon commander, and a Raider team commander, I mean, that's the best jobs in the Marine Corps, I think, by far. And so I'd had enough and decided to get out. I don't know that I had a great plan other than, I'd taken the GMAT right before I got out and did pretty well on that, but I hadn't applied to schools. I took it in the spring, like when, 3rd round, applications were due. I mean, it was, 2010, it wasn't like it was extremely well-trodden path, but I had a good buddy. He's like, dude, you need to go use the GI Bill, go back to school. go figure out what you want to be with the rest of your life. So that's where that journey started. So,
and that's when you went to.
That's when I went to business school. So I took basically a year. I don't know if it was a year off. I had the intention of taking a year off. I got out, took a couple months off, started looking at schools. Ultimately got into Wharton and went and got my MBA at Wharton. And it was there while I was at Wharton that all I knew about while I was there is that I didn't want to be a banker and I didn't want to be a consultant. And 60% of the class goes into banking and consulting there. And they go to all the best consulting shops and all the best banks. And I was like, this is not for me. This is not like, you're not going to convince me that I need to be working on a PowerPoint or Excel spreadsheet at 3:00 in the morning. It's just not, I want to solve real problems. I want to lead people. Those jobs don't utilize any of the quote unquote tangible skills that I thought I brought to the table, which was, leading teams and solving problems. So a buddy of mine during my first year, he was a year ahead of me. He was another military guy. He turned to me and said, "Hey, you ought to look at energy. It's in Texas and they like veterans." And off I went. So kid from Maryland had been in the Marine Corps, then bumping around Houston and DFW and other places, just trying to have conversations with anybody that'll talk to me about oil and gas and opportunities in the oil and gas space to go, quote unquote, lead people and solve problems. And there was a little bit more to the thesis in terms of, I thought that my Marine Corps experience obviously gave me great credibility and ability to relate to the kind of the blue collar workers that are out there on the front lines in the energy space. But the MBA was that polish or maybe that finishing school that allows me to take that blue collar experience and the ability to speak that language and translate that into, for lack of a better term, translate that into the boardroom and really be able to, if you can speak both those languages and bridge that gap and understand like the high finance, so as well as understand the nuance of leading people and managing people and what really makes them tick, and how you take care of people in order to get them, all pulling and rowing in the same direction. That I felt like that was kind of, going to be a powerful combination, going to whatever place I landed.
Yeah. So where did you land?
So I landed at a private oilfield services company that had recently just changed its name from FracTech to FTS International. The COO at the time, well, I guess I'd interned there as the world's oldest intern in the summer prior, and I'd worked kind of in the finance and corporate development department, building like financial models and learning stuff that like I needed to learn, but was not for me. And the COO basically said, "Hey, I want you to come back, and I want you to learn operations, and I want to put you in operations leadership roles when you come back full time." And so that's what I did. And for the first year, to his credit, he said, "Look, I'm going to give you basically a year to learn the business." And I went to every piece of training that the company offered in terms of petroleum engineering and drilling engineering and any sort of reservoir geology. Like I'm no expert in any of that stuff. I would say I'm barely literate in that stuff, but I knew enough to kind of understand conceptually. And then I also went around and I worked. I worked for a couple of weeks in every district as like an extra hand on a frac crew. The first frac crew I went to was out in the Haynesville Shale. I was on the night shift doing work for Anadarko, and my call sign on the radio was corporate. They're like, "Hey, corporate, get over here." And they were all just super keyed up on the fact, they just love the fact that there was some guy from corporate who was out there on their frac crew. And I was with that crew for, at least 3 weeks. And just had a blast. And look, the guy who was the service supervisor on that crew is still a friend of mine today. I had the opportunity, like further down years later, while I was still at FTS, I had the opportunity to promote him to district manager. And he was the guy that, he was the first one to really teach me the ropes of frac. And those guys, man, they tried to work me to death. And they didn't know anything other than I was just this guy from corporate. And then they started getting to know me and they're like, oh, we got this like special operations dude. No wonder we can't work him to death. I'll be damned if they were going to outwork me, right? So if there was something that needed to be done on location, I was Johnny on the spot. I had a great time, learned a ton and did that around the company, South Texas and West Texas and up in PA, and just had a lot of fun with it and really got to learn the business and learn the company. When my year was up, they moved me into an operations leadership role and did that for a while, and then kind of ran headlong into the downturn at the end of 2014, when the industry just got decimated with the Saudis saying they were just going to ramp production and try and kill the shale industry, and our fleet count went from maybe not overnight, but it went from like 32 down to at one point I think the base was like 10 or 11. So it was a wild ride. And that next from basically December of 2014 until really like May of 2015 was really miserable. So miserable. I mean, I was getting pretty checked out. When I got moved in the operations side, I got put under a guy who wasn't that great to work for. Wasn't really interested in kind of my development or any of the things that I thought I could bring to the table, and much more interested in telling me I didn't have enough experience and didn't know what I was talking about. And my attitude was like, well, I'll show you. Anyway, long story longer, ended up finding or getting introduced to the guy who would become my boss. For lack of a better term, I basically recruited my own boss. I was about to quit. I literally was about to quit. I went to the COO who had given me the opportunity and the CEO of the company and said, and this is maybe foolish of me, but I didn't really care at this point. I was so miserable. My wife was, yelling at me like, you got to get out of here. This isn't healthy. And I told them, I was like, look, I don't care if I work here another day, but I'm not working for this guy another day. And it had some of the desired effect in that I didn't have to work for that guy anymore. But it took another 4 or 5 months for that guy to get fired. And in that time I was, we were downsizing the company, and I basically got put in charge of, hey, go shut this facility down and lay all these people off and, pack all this stuff up and consolidate it. I was the shutter downer of things guy for a couple months. And that wasn't obvious, as you would expect, wasn't much better than the previous job that I had, other than that I didn't have an awful boss that I was reporting to. I was a little bit left alone on an island, but I still believed in the company. I thought we had a good thing going. And there was a guy that I had heard, basically made other guys that I knew and respected in the industry had made mention of this guy, and he had recently become available. And so I created an opportunity for he and I to meet for lunch, and, my whole plan. And he was, we needed a new operations lead, whether it was at the COO or senior vice president operator. We need somebody to come in and revamp operations. And, as far as I knew, this was, I'd heard just amazing things about this guy. And sure enough, I went out and met him and said, hey, you should come run operations for us. He's like, well, you're not in charge of anything. So how do you intend to get this done?
You're like, I'm Jamie P.
Yeah.
Challenge accepted.
And I said, well, I'm going to introduce. At the time, I actually had we had a board member who was terrific, who's been a great mentor to me over the course of my career. And I said, well, I'm going to introduce you to this guy who's on the board, and then we'll introduce you to the CEO. And I think the board member is going to tell the CEO that he needs to hire you. And he's like, this guy looks at me. He's like, you're out of your mind. Like, what do you think the chances of this are? I'm like, I don't know, 1,000,000 to 1, but who cares? Like, we got to try. Sure enough, like, plan went off without a hitch, apparently, because I introduced him to the board member who introduced him to the CEO. And next thing you know, probably 2 months later, he's showing up as my boss. I immediately, as soon as the day he walked in, I was his one direct report. And then I became his tour guide around the company for about a month and a half while he basically did an assessment of the company. All of the senior operations team got really nervous and bent out of shape and then quit And the ones that didn't quit, when the senior and the head of ops quit, this guy took over, and then we went around and basically cleaned house on all the things that we said needed to get done in order to start rebuilding the company in order to try and survive. And it was awful. I mean, 2015 was awful. 2016 was miserable. We were an over-levered oilfield service company. Fortunately, we didn't have any debt maturities due in the near term, and we had enough cash. But for 2016, I mean, we basically worked for $0 in EBITDA for the entire year. And it wasn't until 17 that things started turning around. And when they did turn around, all the groundwork that we laid in the back half of 15 and all through 16 really started to take hold, really focused on efficiencies. And next thing you know, the ramp was just unbelievable. I mean, the ramp across 2017, we beat our expectations. We beat our board's expectations and our own expectations every single quarter for the entire year of 2017. And we're fortunate to ride that straight into 2018 and hit a window that allowed us to take the company public, and seemingly, all of our debt woes. At that point, we're like, oh, all of our debt woes are solved. We're clear. And getting to do that was really cool. I mean, I was one of the few guys that got to go to New York. I was up on the podium for the bell ringing. That was really just a unique opportunity. It's so cool to have been, such a part of turning that operation around, building the team and getting the right metrics in place so that we could make the thing go. And all that culminated in a very exciting IPO. And, there's a lot of ins, outs and what have yous, but, another company had been sniffing around me before the IPO to, see if I would jump ship. And a month after the IPO, I did jump ship. And that was probably one of the hardest decisions of my life in terms of the hardest part was leaving my boss, who he's still one of my best friends today. And I can't believe that, it's almost, February, March will be 3 years since I quit him, as he likes to remind me.
Like a scene out of Brokeback Mountain. I can't quit you.
People actually were sending us that meme. Because he and I were thick as thieves. We spent we spent 80% of our days together figuring out how we're going to make that company go. And, the first year and a half was literally just fixing stuff. And then the 2017 was really dialing everything in. And then, we hit the perfect window to get the company public. And then that window slammed shut. And, he and I were talking in early of Q1 of 2018. We're like, this thing's already overheated. We're about to lose pricing power. And I'll be damned if that didn't play out exactly as, he and I both anticipated. It was a steady decline from the end of Q1. And still, the markets, it was a steady decline. They were losing pricing power, month over month, or quarter over quarter. And, unbelievably, I mean, it's 2020 and the company was public for, I don't know how many quarters. And then they entered Chapter 11 restructuring a couple months ago, I think. And that should be emerging here soon. We thought we had solved our debt woes, but, sadly, even, taking, at the time when he and I first took over operations, we had $1.5 billion in debt on the balance sheet. And by the time we got done the IPO, I think it was down to $400 million in net debt. We generated, over $1 billion. We generated $1 billion in free cash to clean the balance sheet up, and it still wasn't enough. And that's part. This market is insanely cyclical. Something that a stupid farm boy from Maryland has no appreciation for before they join the oil and gas business. I think maybe if I'd known this, I would have thought better about.
Gotta be the banker.
It's insane how high the highs are and how low the lows are.
Yeah.
And this past year hasn't been any better. I mean, this year has been equally as insane in terms of, how high the highs were. And then, with COVID hitting, this new company that I joined, we were really starting to fire on all cylinders in Q1, and then COVID hit, and we had steady work on the calendar through April. And then at the end of April, we felt like Thelma and Louise, like we were just hitting the gas, heading straight for a cliff, because we knew once April was over, the calendar was, there was nothing on the calendar. We went from like 8 crews to 2. And then it became, okay, like what's not bolted down? What can we sell? What's got to go? How do we manage costs to get to whatever the backside of this looks like? And I think we've weathered the storm quite well. We've weathered the storm probably a lot better than our peers. We're not over levered. And that's been, due in large part, we've got a great finance team. That's helped really think deeply on all that stuff and help manage that. A great ownership structure that's been super supportive of us and all the decisions that we had to make. And here we are coming out of Q3, work started landing back on the calendar, and the business model really started to kind of gain a lot more traction. We're growing. We're growing again and growing like crazy. So now I've got the opposite problem of, how do you go from 2 crews in May, June to, I think it's going to be 11 crews by the end of December. And that's a lot of hiring and a lot of training and a lot of stuff you have to get ready. And that's a lot better problem to solve, and certainly not complaining about it. I try not to shout that from the rooftops too loudly in terms of, because it's there's very few companies in the oil and gas space that are having to deal with growth problems right now. A lot of folks are still really struggling. And so very happy about where we are. I'm really excited about where we're headed, but it's been quite a ride.
So just for the listeners, what all goes into a crew? How many people are in a crew? What does that entail?
Yeah. So the company, when I left FTS International, I joined a company called TSS, otherwise known as Total Sand Solution. We are we're kind of a high, at our base, we are a trucking company. We're a trucking company that focuses on oil and gas logistics. And when I say oil and gas logistics, specifically focuses on the delivery of frac sand to well sites. And, every frac job that's going on requires somewhere between 65 and 130 tractor trailer truckloads of sand delivered a day. So when you think about what it takes and those truckloads can never be late. So when you think about what it takes in order to make that happen, you've got a lot of trucks on the road. You're pulling from multiple origin points and trying to time them perfectly and manage them perfectly, to get them to the destination on time every time. So it's a massive linear programming model at its kind of its heart and soul, and it takes technology and people to make that happen. So we manage that process from the mine to the well site. We own trucks and we manage other people's trucks. We help people procure the sand that they need. And then we also own the well site equipment that we deliver the sand into. And we have our people on location that are A, receiving the trucks, and B, managing our equipment on that location. So every well site crew is probably about 6 to 9 people. It's 2 to 3 guys per shift. So you got days, nights, and days off. So there's 2 or 3 of our guys on that job site at all times, receiving those trucks and running the equipment. And then here in Fort Worth, we've got a dispatch desk that's manned 24/7, 365, literally managing the trucks that are going into all those well sites. Oil and gas business, some folks take off for Thanksgiving and Christmas, some folks don't. So there's always somebody in there dispatching trucks on Christmas and Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And there's obviously folks on location receiving those trucks. So we're trying to solve that problem. We're trying to do it in a hyper efficient maximizing asset efficiency and asset utilization, down to, the pound of sand, and the second, in terms of how you make that whole machine work and work really, really well. Because if you can do it really, really well, it can be a great business. But it's a business that historically has been done with, a big chief tablet, maybe an Excel spreadsheet, and the telephone. And how do you build we're a bit of a, while we're a trucking company, we're a bit of a hybrid trucking / technology company, and that we've built our own software platform that manages this internally. We've got our own team of programmers that are in there developing, and our software and our app are getting updated every week with new features and new tweaks that make the machine run better. And we're constantly innovating on the software side. We're constantly innovating on the well site equipment side to make that better as well. In terms of what can we do in order to make the system work, more fluidly, eliminate wasted time, eliminate wasted space, and just sort of maximize the opportunity of the driver, the opportunity of the customer, the opportunity of our equipment to, be more efficient than anybody else can be, and be more resilient than anybody else can be when things start going wrong. If a mine shuts down because of weather, okay, well, where's my backup? Where's my primary backup? Where's my secondary backup? How am I going to absorb this into the system? Or if one of the wells, one of the delivery places goes down, and I've got 20 trucks that are en route to a location that's just shut down. It's going to be shut down for 2 days because something went wrong, under the ground. Okay, well, how do I make sure that those trucks don't get their time wasted? How do I divert them? How do I manage them? How do I be more resilient and optimize this system in a way that, historically it's not been done. So that's the focus. I mean, that's the problem we're trying to solve every day. That's the focus, basically, of the entire team, day in and day out. So
you got exactly what you were looking for, which was problem solving.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing that I think attracted me to FTS, was the opportunity to really solve a problem and make that company run better. And that's the thing that attracted me to TSS, was the opportunity to, help solve a problem and make a company run better, and kind of be able to see the long-term vision and see the potential in terms of if we can achieve this, then we will, then the results will be, X or Y. And being able to, figure out how you get from A to B, that's a lot of fun. And building the team inside of that's a lot of fun. And, helping build the metrics and the processes that help get you there, that's seeing that evolve. And there's a lot, I get a lot of satisfaction from seeing a team go from being not very good at something to being extremely good at something, and helping identify those people. And look, I'm as guilty as anybody. I've swung on people and missed. The business, in the past 3 years, our business has had to morph drastically in terms of what our original focus was to where we are focused today. And you've talked about it in some of the other podcasts. Look, there's plenty of dead bodies on the side of the road. Mm-hmm. And some of those are due to the fact that, I made mistakes and, hired the wrong person, or potentially I was unable to give the person some of the time that they needed in order to develop, in order to be successful. Or, in some cases they just weren't the right person for the job. And that bums you out. I mean, I hate not being able to, one of the hardest parts for me is not getting a person to kind of live up to the potential that I think that they have, or be able to get them to be where I want them to be or where I need them to be in order to be successful. I struggled with that at FTS in terms of, folks would be missing the mark. And I just don't want to give up on people. I generally want to believe that, as a Marine, I'm like, well, I could just lead them better. Right. Yeah. And I think when it comes to leading that, I can provide plenty of leadership, but, I'm definitely not I'm certainly not the greatest manager. I need if you're going to be managed by me, I need you to be extremely comfortable with the fact that you may not hear from me for 2 days, right? I need you to be comfortable with plenty of autonomy, because I'm not going to be running around checking up after you all the time. Trying to do better job of those things as we grind through some of the nitty gritty execution stuff. But that's one, it's not natural to me, and two, there's just a lot of things going on. The company's got a lot on its plate, and one day I'm trying to solve problems on what's going on in the Northeast, and the next day I'm completely swamped in stuff in West Texas. And if your best time to get a hold of me is when I'm driving either to or from West Texas, quite frankly,
which by the way is usually about 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I'm the only person you call because I'm the only idiot that gets up at 4:00 in the morning. You're like, Spann's up, I'll call.
Yep. I got a short list of people I can talk to at 5:00 in the morning.
Well, and it's kind of funny too, is you look at where we came from in the Marines and what we did, right? Is it externally sets us up for success, but internally sets us up for a little bit of failure, right? Because we were surrounded by the best talent in the world. Self-starters, didn't have to, you don't even need, matter of fact, if you check on them, it's because you were bored.
Yeah.
Right? And then you get out of here and that talent may be there, but they haven't demonstrated that steps to go, hey, I have the potential and I want to demonstrate the potential, right? Yep. And that's frustrating for guys like you and I, because we're like, man, we see you have it, but they just don't take that step.
I think, in the recon world and in the special operations world, there's so much value and attention paid to guys having good initiative, being able to there's the idea of commander's intent. The commander sets out an intent. As long as you're staying basically inside the right and left lateral limits of that, if you're staying inside of that, you really can't go wrong. So if you see a problem coming down the road, don't go tell me, hey, I see a problem coming down the road. You should solve it.
Yeah.
And I think the civilian world in many cases is less comfortable with the idea of commander's intent, and B, is less comfortable with the idea of people really just basically taking the initiative. And one of the things we always used to say in the Marine Corps was, beg for forgiveness, don't ask for permission. Right? If you saw the opportunity to take advantage of something, whether that was on the battlefield with the enemy, or create an opportunity for your team to go do something, or acquire something that maybe belonged to a sister service that they might not really notice.
And it was never stealing; it was acquiring.
Yeah, so
Gear Drift is gearing this.
I'm very comfortable with the idea of beg for forgiveness, don't ask for permission.
And our poor wives are still married to this, right?
Yeah.
With the same philosophies.
So, and luckily the concept of people really taking initiative and inside of the commander's intent. And part of that could be I need to maybe do a better job of delivering commander's intent. Right?
But I think you're right about something. Is either they're not comfortable or they don't completely understand the content of that, right? Because any given day, I would rather someone that is making mistakes, but man, they're out there trying to get it, than having to light a fire under someone's ass that you're like,
yeah, absolutely. And look, it warms my heart and we use this, an app that most people are, familiar with, and Slack, to do a lot of communication. And when I see guys on Slack communicating and taking initiative, there's a young guy he's a lead on one of our crews who was taking the bull by the horns, and he was making decisions and trying to make stuff happen. And it was, and he wasn't necessarily he was thinking about solving problems, but it was one of those good initiative, bad judgment. I appreciate you going after it, but let's take a step back and think about, hey, this isn't actually your call to make, because what you see is the right decision for the world you're living in on your one little job site, but the decision you're making is affecting the 3 other job sites around you in a negative way. And we can't have that, which is fine. It's a great teachable moment. It's a great opportunity for him to you pull his head up and be like, here's why we can't have you running around saying, hey, I'm going to do this, or we're going to do this, and I got this guy doing that. And it's whoa, pump the brakes. Yes, if yours was the only job site, that's exactly the way you should be doing it. But we've got an ecosystem to support here. So in this case, I need you to pick your head, raise your hand and say, hey, this is what I need done. Like and guys need to get comfortable with, as guys get more experience and, get a little more time, we've got a young team and, we're constantly trying to develop these guys and give them the opportunity to learn more. And so you don't want to stifle that initiative. I love the fact that the guy was willing to stick his neck out there and say, hey, I'm trying to solve problems.
Yeah.
So like, that's fun, but you can always work with somebody like that.
Well, and so when you're identifying future talent, what are some of the mechanisms or tools that you use?
Well, I know where you're going with this. So, I am also a user of the culture index.
Thank you for calling me several times to tell me that I was not saying it right on my other podcast. Thank you.
And I guess I think I can also be the one to blame for the poor people at Culture Index for introducing you to them.
Yes, absolutely. It is your fault.
But yeah, I've been using Culture Index since I was at FTS. My last boss was the one that introduced me to it, and it's quite an eye opener. I think it's quite an eye opener in terms of like some of the things that you talked about was, I think, Stanton, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of getting the right people in the right seat on the bus, and also understanding how you interact with other members of the team, what they respond to, what makes them tick, what makes, the first time I heard my profile read, it was the most accurate assessment of why I do the things I do and how I think about things. And, the way that Michael Hall delivered it was absolutely hysterical. I was laughing so hard I was crying. And everyone in the room was laughing, was just dying in laughter because it was, 100% dead on. So we use that as an assessment tool to try and help figure out like how we get the right person in the right seat. And, because not everybody should be a lead. Some guys just want to show up and do every day. Some guys just want to execute and they want to be in charge of themselves. And that's really all they want. And other guys are like chomping at the bit for the opportunity to be a supervisor, or, certain profiles make really good dispatchers and certain profiles make really good truck drivers and certain profiles do not make good dispatchers and do not make good truck drivers. I would argue my profile I'd be a miserable dispatcher. I mean, there's plenty of things that I'm completely unqualified to do. I actually made that joke the other day when we were talking about we're trying to fill a well site safety manager position. And I thought I was on mute and I made the comment. I was like, wow. I was like, turns out I'm completely unqualified to work in any position inside this company. As you know, my profile is probably one of the, more unique and, a little bit of an oddball. And look, it's a huge part of my strength, but there are significant weaknesses inside of that profile that, I have to manage around, and manage through and make myself, do things differently or better, which is, can be a struggle every day. And some days it's less of a struggle. And to the extent, part of my motivation is, if I can continue to build the system, that works and manages this stuff, I don't have to pay as much attention to these details that I actually don't want to pay attention to. Right.
I'll never forget when you said, here, take this. And I was like, okay. And then I was beating you up, I think, for like 3 or 4 days. Like, what are my results? Because you were busy. I mean, you're doing things, right? You're executive in the energy industry and you're always busy. And I was like, what is it? What is it? And then finally you sent me a text and you said, your results say you're batshit crazy. Okay. And then I was like, wait, well, that doesn't explain. I already know that I am that. That didn't explain anything. And then when you showed me and you were like, look, man, the reason you're going to have to work for yourself is you are unemployable, right? It was, then when you went through and you broke down, hey, like right here, your autonomy and your sense of urgency are as far apart as they can possibly be, which means you're always going to be bored. You're always going to be looking for that next thing. I thought, man, that really explained my career in the PD, why I was moving every 2 years, right? From one unit to another. Like, hey, I'm bored. I want to, I just want to be let loose and run. Mm-hmm. And so it was, and for Laura, it made all the sense in the world for her. So she was like, look, I know I'm married to an asshole, but as it turns out, this is the way he's wired. And then even more importantly is you gave the assessment to Laura. This was coming up on 2 years ago, pretty close to 2 years ago. And I'll never forget, you called me and you said, you need to start making some company changes or you're going to lose your business partner before the end of this year. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm all ears. What does that mean? And you're like, well, that's the other thing on your profile. You're not necessarily a person for the detail. So,
Laura was, at the time, Laura was working very hard in order to try and be something that she's not.
Yeah.
Right?
And then we became such believers in the system that we went and got Culture Index. And then we got it to utilize it a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted clients to take, because I was like, man, if I can learn this much
in 10
on
minutes.
how I actually should be communicating with my wife, it was just as simple. You're like, hey, by the way, don't expect a response like me, 3 bullet points. But if you really want me to read the email, put whatever you want in the subject line, because I probably didn't even read the 3 bullet points, and I'm going to make a decision yesterday. Where you're like, yeah, Laura, that's not going to happen. And it was funny because even though we know these things about our spouses, when you see it and you understand programming, you're like, oh, wow. And then I thought, man, if I could communicate this well with clients, how would that make business go? And man, it made the world of difference, to the point of, we did an exercise a couple of weeks ago. Is we had the entire team. I want to say the entire team except for me, because they deal with everybody that comes into this, they were like, it's called the Spann Group, and we thought you did everything. As it turns out, you really don't do anything. And I was like, well, that's because I looked at my index and I realized I'm really good at going to find clients. But the rest of the team is really good at doing the stuff that matters, right? In the buying and selling of houses.
Actually takes care of the client.
It takes care of the client. And I did. We actually picked a team based on, Michelle. She has the coordinator profile, right? Which is absolutely what we needed. Someone that likes to be everybody on board, but is very friendly, but has a high sense of urgency, but is going to pay attention to the details. Mm-hmm. And then Lynn, who's A and B trader to the left and the C and D trader to the right. So she loves not having to interact with any human beings and being able to, do all the paperwork. Yeah. And rocks it out, loves her life. And so we ranked clients over the last 2 years. And actually, I think you heard me say this on a podcast already, because you called me and you were like, where did I rank? And it took me a second. And then I was like, look, it doesn't even matter if you're a good client. I'm going to tell you you're a bad client anyways, just because you're my friend and I can't be nice to you. But over 90%, I think it was the number, 90% were 1s and 2s. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't anything that we only chose a particular client based on the profile. It was now we knew how to communicate with that client. And when you communicate with someone the way they prefer to process information, turns out they're pretty easy to work with because there's no confusion, which creates fear. Yep. And you have clarity, which creates trust. And so I really, God, I hate giving you credit for anything because this is just really annoying. But had it not been for you introducing us to Culture Index, I don't know that the team would still be alive. And I don't know that we would be able to deliver the value that we've been able to deliver since taking that on. So I'll say this. Thanks, Jamie.
I mean, look, I'm a huge fan of what they do. I'm a huge fan of, I guess, sadly, the only guy I've interacted with from the Culture Index is Michael Hall, in terms, because I've heard that the rest of the team is really good. But at the same time, like at this point, I don't want to deal with anybody other than Michael Hall, because he's actually, I've sat through the class, I think 3 or 4 times now with, at FTS and then at TSS. And I've introduced Culture Index to, all of my best friends, all the ones that I want to see be more successful. Interestingly, one of the other funny things that I found is, all of my closest friends all have, by and large, for the most part, have similar profiles. I like I do a guys trip every year. We go skiing together every year, a bunch of guys I was in the Marine Corps with. And it's a really good group of guys. And these are all my best friends in the Marine Corps. And every single one of us is a high A profile.
Yeah.
Like massively high A profile. With the exception of one. He's the one that drives all of us the most crazy. It's just funny.
Yeah.
And all of the guys that I'm closest with and stay in touch with on the most regular basis, you and other folks that I mean, man, the guys that I'm closest with are all high A profiles. And I think it's just kind of a funny thing in terms of that particular group tends to seek out each other more than any other, from what I understand. I've had this conversation with Michael and with other friends. I mean, Buddy Peterson, who you know, and Dan Runsheimer,
Mm-hmm.
Also another high A profile. These are all the guys that are closest to me in my life, which is just kind of an interesting coincidence. But
yeah, that's I agree with you. Is like everybody on our team, their A trait is to the left. So I'm the only person. Not only is my A trait to the right, but it is extremely high.
Right, yeah.
Way extreme profile. And so that's also what helped us restructure the team. Is I really view myself as a very good leader, but probably one of the worst managers on the planet, because I don't want to have to check on things. I like to start the race before the gun goes off, while the rest of my team likes to wait for the gun to go off to start the race. Yeah. And so my executive coach, Tony, was like, how about we just take you out of all management and all decision making? And I was like, man, it's mine.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you just need to be involved in the vision setting, right?
Right. And then, but once we got there, my life, my wife's life, the team's life, everybody's life just got better. Right. Mm-hmm. And then even when...
It's not surprising to me that the less you're involved in something, the better everybody.
Dude, that is fact right there. That is fact.
So with all your free time, you've been working out a lot more, I guess, right?
Man, you are... Really don't even know why I invited you to this podcast. Hater.
Is that a no?
You get in shape by breathing and you still work out. Like on Marine Corps birthday when you made me mad and I was like, let's go get a drink. And you're like, well, I just got a steak and I'm going to the house and I'm going to go do some pull-ups. And you were like, do you know what those are? And I was like, go away. I don't even know why I called you to have a birthday drink with you. But no, is, we try to explain to all our clients now is like, you're really not going to see Jeremy unless there's a problem, because by design, I'm a problem solver. And actually the chaos of problems is where my clarity comes in. And so when the pandemic hit and it was, hey, we're going to do some unorthodox stuff and here's what we're going to go do. Yeah. This is how we're going to do it. And at that point, the team was like, okay, that's what you're good at. So we're gonna follow lead on that. And then we were able to pull through and actually just having a phenomenal
you guys
year.
have thrived, right? So.
I'm not gonna lie to you. This year has not sucked business-wise, right? Yeah. The restaurant, on the other hand, like all restaurants, I had John Bonnell on here.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. We recorded with John and just talking about how the restaurant industry has been decimated. And just, I mean, the retail, hospitality.
Oh, it's terrifying.
It's
really, really terrifying.
It is crazy, right? And then it was funny because you like to take credit for everything for my success. So, but not everything, because then you were like, oh, so you have been introduced to Zero Hit. And I was like, yeah, by somebody else.
Yeah. It's a good source of information. I mean, they get a lot of good information. They got a lot of different perspectives on there. Mm-hmm. I think that, the cynics would say, there's too much conspiracy theory nonsense, or there's too much doom and gloom on there. But there's a lot of real economic data that comes through there, real foreign policy, just analysis that has a less clear of an agenda of like kind of some of the mainstream media outlets. And I mean, that website probably costs like $5 year to maintain in terms of like there's no.
It's not the
sophistication
sexiest website out there.
But the folks you get like I've been reading Zero Hedge for probably since I was in grad school, and I think you get some real market insight, real policy insight, real foreign policy insight. Without the, it's not written in a way to be clickbait that, for lack of, that CNN or NBC or Fox or any, it's just clickbait, like you have to actually, if you're on Zero Hedge, you're actually there because you want to read it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can read, by the way.
That's a rumor.
Yeah. I was actually reading it. Actually, if you highlight it and you hit Siri, it'll read it for you. So technically like reading it.
I didn't know that.
But
I'm not an iPhone wizard. So if Siri will read me things, that might even get more efficient.
They might be able to not even have to worry about half this stuff. So where do you think the economy is heading? And here's the thing for the listeners out there, and this is the caveat I'm going to get, right? This is going to be our opinion on what we see and where that comes from. And that's basically where I just want the raw opinion of where you think. Not because this is where we hope it goes, but just what we see. Right?
Yeah. Well, I guess first and foremost, and I have to be, but I'm bullish oil and gas, even with a Biden administration. I think there's a lot of things that are said during campaigns that in order to appeal to a certain demographic that are never lived up to. At the end of the day, the majority of Republicans and Democrats are going to lose their mind if they pay more at the pump or they pay more to heat their home. And, ban fracking at your own peril, right? The American energy independence is probably one of the most, if not the most currently important foreign policy tool that the United States has at its disposal right now. It's changed the balance of power.
Explain what you mean by that, just so we listeners fully understand.
Look, it has changed the way it has changed the way that the U.S. has to treat the Middle East and the entire Middle East. The power shift is, or the balance of power has totally changed. Quite frankly, the Saudis and the rest of the Middle East have lost their largest bargaining chip to kind of hold over the head of the Americans. And our ability to produce energy, insures against bad behavior. And I think by and large, if we take a look at like love them or hate them, the foreign policy successes that President Trump has had in terms of negotiating some peace deals with Arab countries and Israel, it's really remarkable. And that doesn't happen without American energy independence. So look, why no administration would ever kind of abandon that ship. So I'm bullish. I'm bullish American oil and gas going forward. The global energy demand, while it's taking a hit with the coronavirus, is not going down. And renewables are going to be an important part of that. But the products that come from oil and gas, everything in this room, is made from oil and gas. And, the electrification of the global car fleet is further away than anybody wants to believe. And, the power plants that are going to charge those electric cars, there's a large number of them are going to be natural gas fired. I think overall economy, I'm significantly concerned with the number of, obviously here we sit on November 13th, Friday the 13th, and COVID cases in the U.S. are spiking. There's more states are locking down again. It's not going to be good for the U.S. economy. It's interesting as I talk to friends of mine that are in blue states versus red states, and when I think about where we are here today in Texas, and my wife works in healthcare, and case numbers are spiking and going up, and hospitals are starting to approach some sort of close to capacity levels and opening up wings and things like that in order to deal with this. Texas, by and large, though, feels like it's getting back to a semblance of normal. Now, we'll see if that is the case if that is the case if cases continue to keep spiking. I don't know. I struggle with the idea that Texas is going to shut it all down again. Just because I think everybody's realizing that hasn't been good for people's kind of mental and emotional health. Now, there will, does it turn into a public health crisis if we don't kind of slow down some of the spread? I'm not the epidemiologist. I don't know, but when I talk to folks in particularly in blue states, they're living in a very different world than we are down here in Texas. I talked to one of my great friends. He lives in New York. He was in the city, now is on Long Island, and they have a very different reality than the one that we have down here in terms of their ability to kind of operate freely and feel like they're, in some sort of semblance of normal. California the same way. I talked to one of my really good friends and former roommates when I was in the Marine Corps, and he's opening like all of the Dunkin' Donuts in San Diego County. You should have him on your podcast to be hilarious. Former Marine helicopter pilot. Just a remarkable human, but they're like San Diego County's locking things back down. And you would think he would be suffering massively. He's like, I haven't opened the one showroom, or what does he call them? Whatever the inside store. He's like, my drive-thrus are literally going ballistic. He's like, I got hour-long waits in the drive-thru right now. It's like I can't get cars through.
Wow.
But other than that, I mean, the shutdowns are all happening. Schools are looking at closing schools again. I mean, it's tough. And I don't know, we can armchair quarterback it to death. I feel like, sadly, I feel like a lot of the quote unquote, for lack of a better term from the book you asked me to read, the technocrats wasted their credibility with the first wave.
Did you actually read that?
I'm like, well, I haven't read it. I've listened to it.
Yeah.
I'm like 30 minutes from the end.
Okay. So you've pretty much gotten through the book.
Yeah.
But the book he's referring to is The Storm Before the Calm by George Friedman.
Yeah. So like, I think I'm concerned about the number, like the unemployment numbers. I think seemingly there's going to have to be another stimulus deal done in order to basically keep people paying their bills, keep people from getting evicted, keep food on the tables. But at the same time, we've already launched the most massive stimulus program that's ever been conceived of, and it wasn't enough. What's the end state? Because we can't live on free money forever. Mm-hmm. And that's concerning to me as well. I mean, you read enough Zero Hedge, you're like, this debt problem is eventually going to become a problem. So I don't know what the end state looks like. I think, I'm cautious in terms of how I'm thinking about sort of managing my own cash and, how I'm spending my money and what I'm spending my money on, and thinking about how I live my life sort of responsibly in case things, do get significantly more tumultuous in terms of whether it's, COVID related or, some sort of debt crisis, or, seemingly, we've quote unquote been in a economic expansion and a bull market for, the longest bull market in history without really having a correction. I mean, you could say that March was a correction. March and April was a correction, but, I don't know that there's such thing as a 2-month recession. The market's dropped, but, the stimulus insulated everybody from that. You could say that we're technically in a recession today, but people aren't behaving like it's a recession because of the amount of stimulus that's been pumped in.
Still living in la-la land.
And the expectation that there's more stimulus coming. Look, the housing market is going ballistic. The stock market's at all-time highs. When the COVID vaccine was, quote unquote, announced that there was 90% efficacious the other day, stock markets went up by 1,800 points and at the open. Obviously didn't stay that high, but you would think, okay, it's 90% efficacious and everybody got the vaccine that day, right? Like that was that market reaction. Mm-hmm. We're months and months and months away from being able to distribute the vaccine, I think, in any real numbers. So I think we got a lot of wood to chop ahead of us, and these obviously extremely sort of disjointed, to put it lightly, political times where there's essentially no agreement, no compromise between the two political parties. It's not making it any better or easier. And everybody is, both sides have drawn their lines and doing everything they can in order to prevent the other side from getting any quote unquote political wins. So now, stimulus, any future stimulus is now in question. Now, whether or not that continues, I don't know. Seemingly, there's going to be enough squealing from the American public that something has to get done, especially with cases rising. But I think it's going to be a wild ride. It's going to be a really wild ride, and I'm not super bullish. And I mean, it feels like we're overdue for some sort of real correction, but I don't know what the catalyst for that's going to be. That creates that correction, or some sort of. I mean, we need to take our medicine at some point. This has been going on for quite some time, but seemingly more stimulus on the horizon. So,
yeah,
the party's going to go on for a little while longer, it seems like.
Well, so I want to throw out a statement, and you respond to it. So you know me, I'm an information junkie, and it's all I do from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. is studying headlines, multiple publications, just looking for indicators. And over a third of U.S. jobs in the United States fall in the restaurant, retail, hospitality, transportation for travel, hotels, all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. More than a third, actually, I think. I heard a different statistic the other day, but I haven't had a chance to confirm that was saying that it was quite a bit more than that. And then I look at where those same industries are just absolutely taking it in the chin right now. That, not that I want this, but I think the data is pointing to 20% or higher unemployment. Not necessarily maybe in one region, but mm-hmm. the point you made mm-hmm. the other day, we had this conversation from coast to coast, 20% or higher unemployment by the end of August 2021.
I mean, I'm not seeing any reason to not believe that to be true. Read a headline today that said that if 40 or 50% of the hotels in New York City were open in a year, that would be a great outcome.
How much did you just say?
If 40 to 50% of the hotels in New York City were open in a year, that would be a great outcome.
The reason I heard it, but I wanted you to say it again because this is the kind of stuff that I want the listeners to be able to let that one soak in.
Yeah. And you're going to have, I think we're going to see a lot of businesses are not able to service their debt. There's going to be more restructurings. I think the initial, CARES Act, the initial stimulus that got some money in the hands of companies in order to get them through the May-June timeframe. Well-intentioned, and I think by and large reasonably well executed. I think a lot of companies took advantage of that, and I think it gave them the initial lifeline to get through. Now, but there's no solving, there isn't enough stimulus in the world to solve the restaurant business problem, the hospitality, by and large, most hotels business problem, the airline business problem. What those industries look like coming out the backside of this, they're all going to be completely different.
So when I was interviewing John Bonnell, and man, a real emotional response from him where he's got 265 employees and he was only able to retain 31. And since then, now 8 months later, almost 8 months later to the date, he's only been able to bring back half because things at 50% capacity. He goes, look, we went to 75% capacity, but when you got to have all the tables 6 feet apart, he goes, you're still at 50% capacity because you don't have that much room in there.
Yep.
And then And who this is really going to affect is this is going to affect the $10 an hour worker, right? Because the $10 an hour worker, yeah, there's some standard deviations in there that are going to be able to go get other jobs, sure. But for the most part, they're not lining up to get engineering jobs and doctor jobs and all these other jobs. And that is a large bulk of the jobs out there. And so now people are not only not having jobs, but not having disposable income to go spend on that very same industry that they work in the retail and the restaurants and whatnot. That I have a hard time seeing any data that suggests anything different. But the thing is my opinion about all this wasn't just COVID driven. I mean, in August 2019, and I was doing a speaking event, and somebody says, "Hey, so you're in real estate. What do you think about the economy?" Blah, blah. And I says, "Well," I said, "you got the stock market doing the stock market thing, but I mean, 90% of the stocks are owned by 10% of the shareholders, right?" And I said, "You got the real estate market that's going gangbusters. I mean, you just refied your house, right? What interest rate did you get?"
2.25.
I just can't even wrap my head around it. So what was it before you refied it?
3 and 3.35 or something like that.
Yeah. So you dropped the whole complete point. So you cut your payment, you cut your interest in a third.
Yeah.
And already you had the
terrific
rate.
Yeah.
So naturally, people that are still qualified to buy houses can, and here's the thing is, even if you shrink the number of people that are qualified, we've been upside down on inventory for so long anyways, that it's really not going to affect that too much. You just, instead of having 20 people bid on a house, you might only have like 5 now, right?
Yeah.
In that more affordable spot.
Well, and look, I mean, I look at Barbara and I mean, look, she works in healthcare and, she's driving real major policy changes at her hospital, and, her job is seemingly safe. She's making a massive difference every day. Both of us, I think, are, quite fortunate in terms of like, the impact that COVID has had on my life. It was a wild summer, right? I mean, I had to, we laid off 50% of our employees. It was terrible. It's the second time in my career where I've had to go through massive layoffs. I mean, in 2015, at FTS, we went from 4,000 employees to 1,000. So, staring people in the face and telling them that you got to lay them off that's one of the most miserable experiences. I don't wish that on anybody.
I'd rather be shot at again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, certainly more fun. You get to shoot back. Right? We've weathered the storm quite well, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that worked for me that have not been able to have them weather the storm as well. It's been great to see. There's been a lot of guys that we laid off that we've been able to bring back. It's fun when I go out and visit job sites as often as kind of I can. At least once a week, I'm out in West Texas and hit a job site out there, and I run into guys. And I saw a guy the other day that the first time I met him, this is probably a year ago, and he kind of freaked out. He's like, "Man, I've worked here for 2 years and I've never met you." And he's like, "You were like a myth." And then we laid him off, and he was a great hand. But we just we had to make a really, really tough decision. I mean, we got so skinny with one crew running in West Texas. We were so skinny. And then we brought him back, and I ran into him the other day, and I said, "Hey, I know him by name." And I said, "Hey, it's good to have you back." He's like, "You remember my name?" He's like, "You knew I was gone?" I was like, "Of course I knew you were gone, and I'm glad to have you back." Right. And like that stuff, like, man, you go get to look guys in the eye, and the jobs that we have for guys, I mean, these guys get paid well. They get paid well, and they work a lot of hours. And they work hard. They work 2 weeks on, 1 week off. But they all make a solid middle class wage. We take care of them. We put them in, hotels or man camps where they're, they get 3 meals a day paid for by us. They've got a nice room that's got their own bathroom. People hear man camp, they think it's a freaking, a tent. I stay in the man camps when I go out to West Texas. You got a full size bed, clean sheets, clean bathroom place. I mean, they clean those rooms so well. There's zero chance and you walk in, you can smell the disinfectant, right? Because they're worried about that. I mean, they got to keep those rooms clean, and so that people feel confident in it. And taking care of guys and, seeing those guys be successful and seeing those guys, their genuine excitement to be, back to work, and helping us grow the company. Look, it's just fun. It's really fun to see. And it's extremely satisfying. It gives you a lot of, I'm just proud of the team, really proud of the team and what they've been able to accomplish. And quite frankly, in the past 2 months, it's been just absolute gangbusters, going from 3 crews to 9 crews or 8 or 9 crews. And we've got 3 more coming in December. It's just, we've had to quintuple our headcount, right? It's crazy. So, but fun.
That's great, man. So you've had one hell of a ride for your life, right? I mean, going from a tree farm growing up to the Marine Corps, Spec Ops, MBA, and even watching, I remember what you and I were eating a burger. The wives, I think both wives were out of town. Your wife's out of town. My wife's out of town. And I called you and I said, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, Barb's out of town with some friends." I was like, "Hey, Laura's gone. Let's go get a beer and a burger at Fred's." And we were sitting here talking. And I remember when you told me, you're like, "Yeah, we're getting ready to take FTS public." And I was like, "Weren't you like broke like just a couple months ago?" And you were like, "America." Mm-hmm. But I remember also when you were going through the very tough decision of, man, I literally, and anybody that would ever walk in a room and say they don't like Buddy, I would look at him and I would question that person's.
You need to have him on the show.
Oh, trust me, he's on the list. He is on the list. But watching how hard that decision was for you to leave there to, go to TSS. But look, successful people are successful people because they don't get to make easy decisions all the time, right? You've literally had a lifetime of making unpopular and hard decisions. And it's kind of funny. The thing I've always seen with you is it's almost like this double-sided coin nemesis is like you want to be the problem solver, but what comes with it is you're solving some problems with some unpopular, tough stuff you got to do, right?
Yeah.
And so with all that being said, if you had to go back to 22-year-old Jamie, and there's a million things you could tell yourself at that point, what would be the one thing if you're like, if you don't listen to anything else, just do or don't do this?
Well, as you know, I can be quite opinionated.
Saying so.
Yeah, if I were to go back, I would probably tell myself to, bite your tongue for a few more seconds and listen for a few seconds longer before you blurt out with extreme confidence why you're right, even though why you're convinced you're right and they're wrong. It probably would have done me a little bit of good. I think it wasn't until I got to grad school and got to approach learning with a goal of just wanting to learn the material and gain as much as possible from the people I was surrounded from, that I actually kind of really, I think, took that in. I was at the Naval Academy I don't remember a thing I learned in any classroom at the Naval Academy. It was the only purpose of being there was getting to the other side so you could then go be in the military. As far as I was concerned, I didn't care about. And I majored in English because it was the easiest degree or easiest major I could think of. Right, it was just about getting through. I remember telling people in my time myself, it doesn't matter what I major in here. It matters that I went here and got through, and then went on to do interesting things afterwards. Nobody cares about what I majored in the Naval Academy. Who cares? I don't care. So it wasn't until I got to grad school, I was I was there with the purpose of I don't care how I do in the class. I care that I learned something. And so taking a step back and, just absorbing more from the people around you and learning more from the people around you, it would have done me more good to slow down a little bit and listen a little bit more, and talk a lot less when I was younger. So.
And so if anybody wants to find out about Total Sand Solutions, where do they go?
We're on the web. It's tssands.com. We have a terrific marketing person who we've got, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can see pictures of our trucks and our people and our equipment doing what they do. We've got a tremendous office here in downtown Fort Worth with a world-class kind of operations center that it looks like something out of, some people have said NASA, other people have said some sort of military control center. It has people in it. The rest of the office doesn't have any people in it. Nobody else is there. There's a handful of us there. The ops team shows up every day. There's a handful of us that are there every day, but our tech team was dying. They were dying to work from home prior to COVID. And then when COVID hit, they started working from home, and I don't think they ever come back.
Yeah.
We got like 10 developers that, if you get one of them to show up like for a day, you're like, oh man, tech team's here. The accounting team, they're never coming back. I don't think they've been super productive from home, and I think by and large most of them, when they need to come in, they come in. But otherwise, like, I think the face of work has changed drastically. I think that's one of the other sides of the coin on the economy is like commercial real estate is fundamentally impaired for, I think, a long, long time. If you got companies like ours that have 50% of the corporate workforce working from home, probably at least 50% of the corporate workforce working from home. We're a freaking trucking company in the energy space. Like, you want to think of any type of company that probably should be backwards forcing people to show up to work every day. Like, we don't need it.
Yeah.
We got a great office. I'll sublease you some space. It's a really cool office. We don't, we're, I don't know, 30% capacity right now.
Yeah.
So.
And it was funny because y'all had just moved into that space.
Yeah. November, it was 2 years. Yeah. Almost 2 years ago to the day.
Yeah.
More or less. Yeah. It was November of, what year is it?
18.
November of 18.
We're in 20 now. So it was 18.
Yeah.
18. Y'all had just moved in there right for the end of 18, if I remember right.
November of 18 is when we moved in there. So, but we're in a good spot. We have what we need. We got plenty of room for growth now.
Well, brother, I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Sharing the wisdom. And it was funny because earlier you were like, oh, why are you tired? All you do is run your mouth. And I told you, I said, I hardly talk on this. And you go, I listen to your podcast. And I was like, were you really listening? Because you did most of the talking here. Or maybe I just purposely shut up so that way I can say, well, yeah, we're on yours. You did all the talking.
Yeah.
But hey, as a fellow Marine and veteran, thanks for what you've done. And man, and you're out there. I mean, COO of a company that's just doing good things. And even though you had to make hard decisions, you're able to also bounce back. And like you said, the guy that didn't even think you knew his name, and you're like, I'm glad you're back.
Yeah. So just trying to do the best I can. Making a couple of mistakes here and there, that's for sure.
Oh, that happens to all of us, right? Well, thanks again for coming on, man. I appreciate
absolutely.
you.
My pleasure. All right.